It really makes us think, what would I do if I had the chance to bring someone I love back, despite potential consequences? Because sometimes dead is better. I'm Micah, a licensed therapist, and here we like to talk about horror. Back when I first started this channel, Pet Sematary was one of my very first topics. And I thought in celebration of exceeding 1,000 subscribers that we would reflect on it a little bit. At that time, I only looked at the original Pet Sematary and some parts of the book, but as of lately, I've watched the 2017 reboot and the prequel Bloodlines, and I want to talk about it, so I'm going to. Alright, so I want to assume that everyone knows this story because, well, come on. But just in case, here's a little overview. A family moves into a new town for the dad's job. Dad's a doctor. Turns out they've bought some cursed land. I think there's like a Wendigo, some evil lurking around. So there's a spot behind their home that is the local pet cemetery. And so this is where everyone buries their pets, but if you go further back, they refer to the ground as being sour. We learn that the Native Americans of the area discovered long ago that if you bury your dead in these spots, they will come back, but different. So when the family pet is killed by a car in a busy street in front of their house, a well-meaning neighbor who was compelled to tell the doctor about this spot. So they go on this trek, they bury the cat. Lo and behold, cat comes back, but it's different. So the dad is a doctor at a school, at a university, and there's a kid that ends up getting hit by the car and dying in their little clinic. And so this is almost like a foreshadowing of everything else that's going to happen. Somebody's going to get hit by a car, they're going to die. Similar to the cat was foreshadowing. This kid dies, and then the dad begins seeing visions of him. It's like he's trying to warn him. He's like, well, you tried to save me, so I'm going to try to warn you. But he's scary. And the little kids see him at various points, and they're like, pass go. So this is when the various stories have some deviation from each other. So there are two children in this family, a daughter named Ellie and a toddler son named Gage. In the first book and movie, the toddler Gage is killed by a truck out in the same way that the cat was. In the new reboot, it's actually the older daughter that's killed in this accident. We'll talk about that some more. So whichever kid, whichever story, similar outcome, they come back, but different. And a lot of people die. In all versions of the story, we are kind of left hanging, not totally sure what ends up happening to all these people that did make it. So we have themes of extreme, profound grief, loss of a pet, the unimaginable and tragic death of a young child. We have multiple little side stories related to some of the characters and their perception and experiences of death. We've got trauma, we've got PTSD, we've got acute stress reactions, death anxiety, all that stuff. My understanding is that the reason why Stephen King thought that this one went too far was because of his own emotional reaction to the story. So losing a child is the worst fear imaginable as a parent. Living life without them seems beyond possibility. I feel as if the story spoke to this fear as a parent. So we examine the individual versions of this story. We can identify a few key differences. There may be some more, but these are the ones I've picked out, so you just tell me what I missed. The book, of course, has more detail. We know how Mr. King is with his detail. I felt more of an emotional impact from the book than the movies because of the detail and the freedom to kind of imagine what's going on in my own head. One of the big differences that stood out to me between movies and book is the retrieval of the body. So once the funeral occurs, the dad goes out to go and get the child. In the book, there's a lot of extra detail about the process, and it's very suspenseful, and he's like creeping into the cemetery and then working really hard, digs him up. Then there's a process of getting him out and carrying him to his car and feeling like the weight of his body, and you can just like feel all the emotion of the dad. And I definitely cried in the book. I cried a little in the movie too. That's pretty sad. So we're going to talk about the new one a little bit. I didn't hate it. I wasn't like, oh my God, best thing ever. But I can appreciate what they were going for. And I kind of like how they did things. They followed it pretty closely. And then they were like, nope, switching it up. Same with Bloodlines, which wasn't a great movie in my opinion. They were trying to follow what the book does in looking back and reflecting on the history of some of the origins of these things. So they were trying to do what the book wanted. That's something I've noticed with more modern reboots of Stephen King stories such as It, that there does tend to be a sequel, prequel that is trying to explain more about what happened in the book. The thing is that like they had to add some stuff, make it a whole movie. One of the things that stood out to me in Bloodlines that was a lot like the book was when Timmy was staring into the sun. The book scene was way creepier though. It like made me very uncomfortable. Like that's one thing I remember about the book is the part where it goes back in the past and we're dealing with like dead Timmy. So back to the reboot. While there are key differences at specific points in the movie, I think the reboot made it work. As I mentioned, the daughter is the child who dies in this version. It was her birthday. Instead of Gage running out into the road and chasing a kite, she goes out into the road to go get her zombie cat Church, who seemingly led her to her demise. Up until the daughter's death, I felt like they kind of made it look like Gage might still be the one that gets killed. Like, he's out there and it's like last moment he's gonna get flattened, but nope. It sucked really bad when she died. It was really horrible. Definitely cried. So her mother collapses and father just holds her and cries. They could have made this like way more disturbing, but I think they wanted it to reach broader audiences, because I don't think that someone would be so intact if they got hit by one of those trucks. Just saying. And I can't imagine the father, he's a doctor, so he's running up there and is like, is there anything I can do? And there's just not. She's gone. We follow almost the same sequence of events. So mother and remaining child leave to go stay with family. Dad's supposed to follow later on, but he wants his daughter back. And he remembers that they buried Church and he came back. He feels compelled under the spell of the sour land to go and bury her, and she comes back. See, it's different with the girl in this story because she is older than Gage, and so she can like talk about things. Gives it an extra creepy factor that I enjoyed, because she could talk about being dead. Gage was just an evil toddler. Not too different from your average toddler, minus the murder. So the girl who plays Ellie, I think, is a top-notch actor. I think they do a great job in her makeup of making her look not quite right. Like, she doesn't look all zombified completely, but there's something wrong. You can see like her face is a little crooked. Ugh. And that's very much as the book describes. Like, it's them, but it's not them. I think this hits different because of Ellie's ability to talk, and she's able to like talk some shit and create emotional distress. There's more antagonizing behavior with Ellie because Gage in the original is just a baby. Can't miss the fact that mom has severe death anxiety and PTSD associated with the death of her very ill sister in her childhood. In the remake, the sister dies because she fell down a food dumbwaiter after she sent the meal up through it knowing she isn't supposed to. So there's some self-blame there. So in the original story, I'm pretty sure she just dramatically and horribly dies in front of her while she's still left home alone to take care of this sister. Great parenting. So both situations, she appears to be experiencing extreme guilt associated with her death, and probably the relief that she received from the challenge of caring for her sister because of her sister's, not only her extreme deformity, which was disturbing for her, but she was real mean. Her sister was real terrible to her and wished her the same pain, which was like, dang, I know you're not feeling too good, but like, don't wish that on a child. In the reboot, Judd doesn't have his wife. She has already died. In the book and in the original movie, she's still alive but dies along the way. In the book, I think it's a heart attack, and I can't remember what it is in the original movie. So I'm going to look it up and I'm going to write it on here. In the original story and the book, the dad is forced to eventually euthanize Gage after he won't stop fucking shit up. It's rough and painful as a parent having to consider making a decision like that. Gage has killed his mom, and dad just didn't learn or was coerced into taking her up there. The story ends with mom coming back to him. In the reboot, again, it's a little girl instead of Gage, but it deviates from that original path. Gage is left in the car for safety while dad goes out there to try to handle zombie mom and zombie kid. Zombie kid buried zombie mom after she was killed. She killed her and then took her up there and buried her, so she came back. And so dad's like, oh shit. Goes up there to try to handle the situation and ends up getting killed too. So everybody dies and is buried and comes back, except for Gage. The movie ends with them approaching Gage, locked in the car, and we are left to the unknown for what happens from there. But of course we assume the worst because, well, we're supposed to. I don't want to talk about bloodlines a lot. It was meh. Like I said, I appreciated some of the comparisons from the book. And like the scene where Judd walks up and finds Timmy staring into the sun is scary as fuck in the book, but it's just a little unsettling in the movie. Pet Sematary remains a classic with dark and horrible themes that even King himself was uncomfortable with. But that's part of what horror is, exploring the dark shit that we're afraid of. This movie uses supernatural themes to examine real life horror. And in this case, the real life horror is the death of a child.